Guys, don't you think it's weird that Tommy keeps dreaming about his arrowhead, and now there's this whole Native American arts exhibit here?
Oh no! Rocky's become self-aware and figured out he's in a television show where thematic elements conveniently tie together to help propel the plot! We must eliminate him before he can alert the others. Or we can just enjoy episode 11 of OZO. Hi there! Welcome back to OZO, the series where I compare Power Ranger Zeo to its Japanese counterpart, Chodiki Sentai Ohranger, to figure out which one is better. This is my 400th video. Can you believe it? Can you honestly believe I have sat down 400 times to do this video making razzmatazz? I can scarcely believe it. Thank you, as always, for making it possible to do something that I love. Now, those of you following along at home might be a bit confused right now. In Ohranger, we last left off on some random future boy doing random future boy stuff. Shouldn't the next two episodes be that two-parter featuring the guy who played Doris Sphinx in Zyuranger? Technically, yes. What am I even saying? Actually, yes. Those are the next episodes. However, they're adapted much later in Power Rangers and are connected to the storyline surrounding the introduction of the 6th Ranger. We're not there yet. It's not really worth getting into right now, so we're just going to skip them for the moment. What we're covering are the first two sets of episodes that introduce a new robot to the team's arsenal. Last year, we saw No Business Like Snow Business take unrelated Ohranger episodes and string them together as a three-parter. Badly. But they still won somehow. Who's making these stupid decisions? Alright, me. But this is another example of that. The Ohranger episodes are somewhat tied together, but the Power Ranger Zeo episodes really push a character development story for Tommy. Let's see how it goes. The days of Ohranger Robo being this invincible dynamo are officially over. An electricity-stealing monster, Bara Builder, ends that streak, putting the giant robot in the shop for quite a while. This isn't really important, but both shows frame this defeat as the heroes foolishly believing that the enemies surrender and dropping their guard. I don't know, I think that's being a bit too hard on them. Yeah, the villains definitely play up the surrender angle with white flag and everything, but there isn't a moment where the giant robot turns around and goes, "Well, I guess I'll just go home then, dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum, oh no, you betrayed me!" The monster runs its tail underground to sneak up behind the robot. I feel like that would have worked regardless of the skit. I don't know, again, it's not important, but it just bugs me when characters are blamed for things that aren't really true. Even though most of this footage is obviously the same, Ohranger makes quite a bigger punch with this by positioning it as the opening of the episode. It's quick. Electricity is being screwed with, there's the monster, the Ohrangers run in, and they get their butts kicked. Wow, the conflict has been established. The heroes are vulnerable. What can they possibly do now? Then we get to spend the rest of the episode dealing with that problem. It's a great example of turning the formula on its head in order to make the viewers feel as unsettled as the characters. Power Rangers doesn't want to do that, and instead pushes this to the midpoint of the episode, only previewing it through Tommy's dreams. This really diminishes the shock. But on top of that, it means they don't have a lot of footage to work with for the first 10 minutes. Have fun watching random power surges happen and people shrugging and wondering what that is. But I will give Power Rangers credit. For a franchise that mostly takes place during the day, it is intriguing to see Tommy go to the power chamber in the middle of the night. What do Alpha and Zordon do at night? Well, Alpha has a sleeping alcove and he even wears a cute little nightcap. I love it. Alpha tells Tommy that he should be in bed, presumably because Evil works on the same schedule and punches out at 5. At this point, the Ohranger story gets moving. The heroes are freaking out, hoping Miura can come up with some solution to get them back in the game. Miura, for his part, is all, "Oh, well, I certainly don't have any skeletons in my closet that are going to come spilling out. Leave me alone, we're doomed, what's wrong with that?" However, the girls miraculously discover that there's an energy signature for another robot just lying out there in the wild somewhere. How convenient! But when Goro goes to investigate, he just happens to arrive at the same time as a young girl, Miyuki, who says, "Don't dig up that robot! That robot killed my brother!" Now it's time for Miura to come clean. That robot killed her brother. Prior to the events of the series, Miura had created a Choriki-powered robot, Red Puncher. One day, Lieutenant Kirino freaks out about the imminent Baranoia invasion, steals Red Puncher, sucks at using it, and ends up buried in the desert. And that's why Miura will never use Red Puncher. Okay, cool story. Goro tells Miyuki, "Look, I'm sorry your brother was an idiot, but we have a job to do, so I'm getting the damn robot." Now, those of you who have followed this series may find this to be somewhat familiar. That could be because it's practically the same thing that happened last time Ohranger introduced the giant robot. Turns out, Miura has a tragic backstory involving a dead colleague who leaves behind a young girl. Last time it was Miko, now it's Miyuki. Even the names are almost the same. Jeez, this is such a lazy copy and paste job. But it actually made sense before. In that case, Baranoia leverages Miura's survivor's guilt as a pain point in order to coerce information out of him about Ohranger Robo. Here, there's just a bad thing that happened. It's not even Miura's fault. It's not because he rushed the building of Red Puncher or because he pushed Kirino into piloting it before he was ready. I'm not saying that as a leader, Miura wouldn't feel some level of responsibility, but there's just no conflict here. He throws out a bunch of exposition, Miyuki exists, and then they all just move on. Hey, there's a robot, cool! It's just an excuse for a new robot to conveniently already be here and for the Ohrangers to not know about it. This is pretty lame. But at least it's not potentially racist. In terms of long-form storytelling, Power Rangers was certainly setting up ideas to be explored later. During the Alien Rangers stuff, all the Kid Rangers travel through time or whatever to get their individual parts of the Zeo Crystal, and each one involves each kid going back to a point of cultural ancestry. Adam goes to Korea, Kat goes to Australia, Aisha goes to Africa and never comes back. As best as I can recall, Tommy's ancestry had never been explored prior to this, so his episode decides he's actually Native American. And while he's on his quest, a man named True of Heart gives him half of an arrowhead, promising him he'll one day find the other half. Well, the day has arrived. Tommy runs into Sam Trueheart, who just happens to look like the same True of Heart young Tommy met in the past, or wherever the hell he went a few months ago. Okay, I'm definitely not the best person to be talking about this. I'm not a Native American, and I am admittedly largely ignorant of the cultural practices of specific tribes. But if it helps, I am Polish, and I don't know much more about that culture either, other than that it takes a surprising number of us to screw in a light bulb. Even admitting that no culture is a monolith when it comes to their opinions on pop culture depictions of them, I really don't know how Native Americans generally feel about the probably well-meaning but kinda cringy and somewhat patronizing 90s New Age depictions that cast Native Americans as speaking in vague self-help platitudes, combining elements from multiple tribes, and having literal magic powers. I think the most jarring example of this is that what is presented as a real exhibit of real Native American art is never explored. It's simply used as a prop to justify introducing these tired tropes. So, expect a lot of vision quests and spirit animals, and people phasing in and out of existence while not much actually happens. I happen to think it's kind of but going forward, I'm going to focus on how it is as a story. That's more for future episodes though. I will say that Sam is played by an actual Native American, Frank Salcedo, so at least there's that. And I'll also say that for what it's worth, most of these Zeo Crystal quests deal with random magic and cultural exoticism stereotypes, so at least the show is equal opportunity in that regard. Since Power Rangers is less about the tragic backstory of the new Zord, renamed from Red Puncher to the Red Battle Zord, and is more about a strange man luring Tommy out into the desert where they'll never find the body, the story behind it changes. After the Zeo Megazord is damaged, Billy announces that he just happens to have been working on a new Zord this entire time. The show at least does something clever with it. This is 4 episodes after Billy returned to Earth from Aquitar, and he based the Zord on their technology so that it is controlled through Tommy's brainwaves. Tommy has to be calm and in control to properly use it, and given his nightmares and Arrowhead angst, this is not the best time for that. Because of this, Power Rangers is able to repurpose Lieutenant Kirino's piloting footage into Tommy struggling to keep his emotions in check. And when Tommy causes the mountains to fall, it's just a temporary oopsie-doodle rather than a fatal accident. While a lot of the Ohranger footage slots in fairly seamlessly, there is a shot of Main Drain holding the other 4 Power Rangers where you can see Miura and Miyuki watching from a distance. You definitely can't tell who they are, but you are going to come away wondering why 2 random people are watching the Power Rangers fight. Speaking of Tommy's emotions, it was definitely this episode that drove something home for me. Look, we love Jason David Frank, but you spend enough time watching someone's performances and you start to notice their acting tics. And for JDF, serious emotions means lots of heavy sighing. Once you notice it, you will never stop noticing it. It became a fun game for me to play as I was prepping for Ozeo. I knew I'd never forget this moment.
Oh man, with everything that's been happening lately, I just hope I can think straight enough to handle it.
3 sighs in 1 line. What a moment. So ultimately, both heroes have to figure out the new robot and use it to punch the crap out of the bad monster. Ohranger does this in a way that is easy for the Power Ranger story to adapt, given that Ohranger also dabbles in New Age, back-to-nature spiritualism. Goro is about to buy the farm until Lieutenant Kirino appears to him to remind him how awesome nature is and that they're both fighting for nature. So then Goro's like, oh yeah, nature, and then he wins. What a whole lot of nothing. And once again, it's a whole lot of nothing stolen from the introduction of Ohranger Robo, where nature had to allow them to combine the robots. I'm pretty sure Goro knows he's fighting for the planet, and if being aware of that is all it takes to pilot the Red Puncher, then Kirino, the person delivering that message, should never have died in the first place. And given that Kirino did die trying to do this, and Goro is far more experienced and controlled than Kirino ever was, what insight could Kirino possibly have? Goro's only lesson is that he should get good, and he gets good because the plot says he does. Goro's vision of Kirino fits perfectly for Tommy to instead imagine Sam Trueheart. I'm impressed how seamless a substitution this is. Even the reflection on the glass is still there. Sam gives him some generic platitude advice, and Tommy realizes that instead of trying to control the Zord, he should see it as an extension of himself. And then he does. In other words, get good. At least we have some idea of what has to change with Tommy, but it hardly seems any more useful than how Zordon or Billy advised him. This is better than Ohranger's version, but not by a lot. Here's the thing. I think both of these episodes suck. Ohranger sucks for being hollow and derivative, Zeo sucks for being mundane and offensive. What I will say though is that the design for the new robot is pretty cool. It's bright and colorful and has Gatling gun arms. I don't think I said it before, but Ohranger Robo looks pretty spiffy too. I compare Ohranger to Jetman a lot, and while Jetman has far better characters and a far better plot, I think its robot designs are largely bland, boxy, and boring, especially compared to these. But that's probably the nicest thing I can say. How do I even score these? I've certainly had ties before, and I think this qualifies, but have I had them in situations where I just think both shows bottomed out? I don't think either show deserves to win anything. So the winner is Ohranger, because it has that episode where Saori runs through an explosion in slow motion. So cool. So much better than either of these episodes. I don't care if it's a cheat, it's the best I can do. Actually, I'm coming back here after editing, Now that I've had to put images to what I wrote, I remember that I at least praised the Ohranger episode for using its structure to more potently tell its story compared to the Power Rangers episode. Because of that, I'm giving the story win to Ohranger, so Ohranger wins this contest. But barely. Don't get cocky, Ohranger. The introduction to the Red Robot continues, and things are a little better, at least in one direction. The bad guys make a boxing monster. Can the new robot prevail in a boxing match when it's specifically designed to punch things? Who can say? It's worth pointing something out. In Ohranger, the various characters have different martial arts styles, with stances that in some way reflect their shape. That's no more apparent than with Shohei, who, as the rectangular box, is revealed to have a history as a boxer. Now, Power Rangers, having largely carried the same characters through multiple Sentai adaptations, sometimes runs into the problem that the characters they're now stepping into don't visually match the characters they used to be. In Season 3 of MMPR, they update the dinosaur-themed stances from Zyuranger into stances that better reflect the ninja animals. Obviously now for Power Rangers Zeo, the characters are suddenly moving like their Ohranger counterparts since a lot of the footage is Ohranger. Can't do anything about that. It's been subtle enough up to this point that it really hasn't had to be addressed, but since this episode is all about boxing, they now have to have Adam take interest in a boxing class so he can match up with the boxing footage his character is going to be slotted into. And it just so happens the youth center is offering one. Then Rocky wanders into the scene and asks, "Guys, don't you think it's weird that Adam keeps talking about boxing and now there's this whole boxing class here?" It almost seems unnecessary though. See, in the Ohranger episode, Baraboxer lures Shohei into a trap by kidnapping their little buddy Mikio. Remember Mikio, the friend of that weird future boy? Yeah, apparently he's friends with the Ohrangers now. Finding Baraboxer a challenge, Shohei counters with his specialty Flying Punch. But what he didn't know is that Baraboxer operates according to Blue Mage rules, where he learns a technique after being hit by it. To add insult to injury, or rather to add injury to insult, performing the Flying Punch breaks Shohei's hand, so he's out of the fight for the rest of the episode. As a result, he decides to train Goro so he can use the Red Puncher to take his place. Power Rangers doesn't break Adam's hand, so they instead get him out of the way by shrinking him down and turning him into a trophy to be won in the upcoming boxing match. And that one scene is the only payoff to Adam learning how to box. A lot of the charm of this episode of Ohranger is in its unhinged commitment to the boxing tropes. Shohei is spurned by his own boxing teacher, Iwashima, who has resented Shohei leaving to join Ohranger. But because he's played by Hayakawa Yuzo, who played Kaori's kindly butler Gia in Jetman, he eventually comes around and decides to train Goro himself. And there is nothing more exciting than a training montage. Okay, this is really more two scenes than a montage, but it's still fun. They even stage a training match between Red Puncher and the recovering Ohranger Robo. This is fantastic. Unfortunately, Power Rangers doesn't have time for any of that because it's too busy with Tommy doing his... This episode features Tommy's vision quest. At least according to Wikipedia, this usually involves cultural ceremonies, fasting, and attempting to receive a vision that might help someone find their purpose in life. Whether or not the Hollywood version of this concept does it any justice, it at least usually serves that kind of internal character function. It helps a character get in touch with themselves, find insight within themselves, and perhaps make a decision they were struggling with. Here, Tommy just wanders around the mountains. He follows a falcon, he looks for a guy on a horse who keeps appearing and disappearing, and that doesn't even count as a vision! It's just more random magic from a guy who's screwing with him. Tommy doesn't learn anything from within, he doesn't overcome any challenges or learn about his culture, he even leaves at one point to do the Power Rangers stuff and is able to come right back and pick up where he left off. The point is, he finds out this guy is his brother and has the other half of the arrowhead. Sam could have written that down on a post-it note and saved us a whole lot of trouble. Suffice it to say, outside of Adam's brief boxing class, where he never even boxes but instead just jumps rope, the boxing element of this episode is reduced to the match at the end. At least Power Rangers can't scrub out the Rock'em Sock'em Robots element of the show, which is great. And it also retains how the bad guys try to cheat. Unfortunately, because Power Rangers doesn't tie the Vision quest to any real character growth or connect it to the external conflict, Tommy just wins with more of the I have to deal with my emotions stuff, as opposed to the tangible work that Gordo puts in. Funnily enough, while both shows have very different endings, they both end on largely the same note. That of manly men loving each other in manly ways. Be it the bonds of brotherhood or the bonds of friendship, it's guy love between two guys. That's a Scrubs reference, okay? I can do a much better job scoring these. For story, Ohranger is far more focused, committing to the wacky idea of inserting their characters into a sports movie. Power Rangers splits its time between Tommy's quest and the boxing concept, and both are weaker for it. Ohranger wins. For characters, while I wish a bit more attention had been paid to Shohei's past relationships, making Shohei a boxer at least feels like an integral part of his character. As for Tommy and his brother, well, we'll see where that goes in future episodes, but for now, Ohranger wins. Finally, for action, are you kidding? Ohranger has the two giant robots fighting a boxing match with each other. I haven't been this disappointed about Power Rangers cutting something out since the Dora song. Ohranger wins, clean sweep. Or should I say, knockout. As long as we're on the subject of boxing, while I don't have any interest in boxing in a general sense, I have always been a huge fan of the game Punch-Out! Yes, I own it in its non-Mike Tyson re-release variant, but it's the same game. I'm actually pretty good at it too, if I do say so myself. When I want to unwind, it's an easy game to breeze through in about half an hour. I get to test my reflexes, keep sharp, you know? I remember when it was a struggle just to survive Tyson, well, Mr. Dream, for 3 rounds with enough points to win by decision. Eventually, it became easy to beat him by knockout. Now, I'm at the point where I've actually gotten a few round 1 knockouts over him. 2 minutes 44 seconds is my personal best. It's not quite speedrunner levels, but come on, put me in, coach! I could take out Red Puncher! Anyway, that's something about me you probably didn't know. I'll see you next time.